those great drafted in the first or second round. But my objective here today isn't only to give you the top options to start and the worst ones that you want to sit, but to help you identify which ones are good starters and aren't good starters each week. But more than anything, we're talking guys that you probably drafted, after the third round, or guys that maybe you drafted in the third round or earlier, right? That you actually have some concerns about. And maybe they started off awfully this season. They got off to a terrible start, but now we're in position to smash. So whether it's keep playing this guy, whether it's, oh my God, I can't believe he's been this good, we're going to start him again, or it's, hey, pump the brakes, don't freak out, get him in your starting lineups this week. That's what we're here for. Let's get into it. Must starts, must sits for week 3. And before we do, if you don't mind, hit that thumbs up. Only takes a second, helps us greatly here, improve the channel, keep things going, and, well, build upon what we've already done thanks to you supporting us all this time. Subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and hit me with a follow at Laffy_D on Twitter. That's LOUGHY_D. Let's get into it. I don't want to say this is a make or break spot for Saquon Barkley because there's still a ton of time left in the season, but we absolutely want to see something sooner than later from a guy who we drafted in the late first or early second rounds. Barkley played on only 3 days rest in week 2's Thursday Night Football loss to Washington, but touched the ball 15 times and actually saw a significant uptick in snaps, logging 84% of them after being on the field for only 48% of them in week 1. Now he'll have 9 days in between games to be fully rested for a mouth-watering matchup against the Falcons, who have been a nightmare on defense and are 3-point dogs on the road. Barkley showed a glimpse of his pre-injury self on Thursday too, with a 41-yard run, and we have to believe he still has the explosion and elusiveness to make him a top-tier running back again. While the early season numbers don't look great, there's no way we aren't plugging Barkley into lineups this Sunday. The Giants' offensive line is still a problem, for sure, but volume will be the key to success for Barkley. And once he's fully healthy, there will be no reason to keep rolling Devonte Booker onto the field, who played only 14% of snaps in week 2. Javonte Williams will very likely be the Broncos' clear lead back by the end of his rookie season, but he isn't there yet. That said, Williams has only seen 1 fewer touch than Melvin Gordon on the season and has out-touched him 27-24 on the ground, so we're making progress. The Broncos have also been in favorable game scripts through the first 2 weeks, but week 3's home matchup against the Jets might be their best one yet. So far, the Jets have a bottom 6 run defense grade on PFF and are 26 in run DVOA on Football Outsiders. And Zach Wilson has been so bad under center in New York that the Denver offense should dominate both time of possession and have favorable field position throughout. While Williams hasn't been wildly impressive to kick off his NFL career, you likely drafted him in the 7th or 8th round, which at worst would have made him a flex play in 12-team leagues. I hadn't been on tent in starting Williams yet at all this season, but this is the week to plug him in as a flex play and let the Jets do their thing for him. Both Williams and Gordon have 4 carries in the red zone this season, but the former is the only one with a carry inside the 10. There's a lot to like in week 3 for the young rookie running back. Mike Williams has been spectacular through the first 2 weeks, leading the Chargers in receptions, targets, and touchdowns. Actually, Williams' 2 touchdown receptions are the only ones Justin Herbert has thrown this year. Williams has a 25% target share too, which is extremely encouraging given the Chargers offense has yet to exhibit that same explosiveness we saw with Herbert under center in 2020. That outburst could happen on Sunday though when they take on the Chiefs, who score points in bunches and almost always force their opponents to throw. Interestingly, Herbert's pass volume is limited in 2 meetings with the Kansas City Chiefs last year, but a lot of that has to do with his efficiency, averaging nearly 10 yards per attempt and eclipsing 300 yards in both of those games. Still, this game boasts a slate-high 55.5-point total, and the Chargers are 6.5-point road dogs. Given Williams' huge early involvement in the offense, and more importantly, his team-leading 3 targets inside the 10-yard line, you'd be crazy not to start him everywhere you have him in Sunday's divisional showdown. Tyson Williams and Marquis Brown both make for great starts this week against the putrid Lions defense. I'd say this first though, don't get ahead of yourself with either of these guys. You aren't starting them over your studs. But if you have either of them on your roster and need to fill the flex or the wide receiver 3 spot,
Hey guys, welcome into another edition of the College Football Prize Picks Show. I am your host, Jordan Vanek, and be sure to subscribe and like to the video. That means a lot to us and everything we're doing over at Awesemo. If you don't know what Prize Picks is, well, Prize Picks is a site that offers daily props for basically every single sport out there, and the most props for college football. That's something we can take advantage to, and basically you can pick up to 5 props, and if you get all 5 players correctly, you 10x on your money, which is huge. And if you go and download this app in the Apple Store or your Google Store, you can use code Awesemo and we will match up to $100 on your first deposit. Joined with me today is one of the best college football minds out there. I'm joined by Matt Gajewski. And how are you doing here, Matt?
I'm doing great, man. I'm really excited for a lot of these conference games to start. We finally have some level playing field, and this makes our analysis really fun for this week in particular. A lot of these non-conference games, we've had different levels of competition, so we're going to start evening the playing field, and I think that's something we can take advantage of on Prize Picks.
Yeah, and I mean the fun part about it is some of these like lower conference teams have been playing out of conference schedules that are pretty weak, so their stats are very they're such a great defense, but going into your conference games when you start playing competition that is better than you, it changes your averages quite drastically, to say the least. But going into the week, who do you have as your first pick that you think is just way too egregious?
I'm out here talking about how excited I am for the conference games. And I want to actually start us off with a non-conference game. And, some of these SEC teams have already played each other, but Missouri's facing Boston College this week. So it's an ACC SEC crossover game. You have quarterback Connor Bazelak at 287 passing yards, which is really high for him. Now, Connor Bazelak does play for a pass first team. Missouri's passing the ball about 59% of the time. Last year, they were just about 50%. So they are a pass first team, but you should see this progress. For Missouri, that is going to be the strength of the Boston College defense they're facing. They've only allowed 187.5 passing yards to start the year. That was the strength last year, and they returned most of their defensive backcourt. Bazelak has been efficient this year. He is averaging 300 yards per game, which is why you see this prop so high. However, if you look at the competition Missouri has faced outside of Kentucky, they really haven't played anybody, which has elevated Bazelak's stats. Went back last year and looked how many times he would have eclipsed this prop, and it would have only been 3 times the entire season. So I think this is a situation where you can sell high on Bazelak and hit the under on his passing prop, 287.5 yards.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Missouri's definitely had some lower competition, and their running back, Batty, has been phenomenal this year. So maybe they get more yards on the ground than they do through the air. But one of the props that I think is just way too, way too low is Casey Thompson over 175 passing yards, because this game is a 61 point total. Texas is favored by only 9 points. They're playing a Texas Tech team that I'm thinking just sells out on Bijan Robinson, which gives Casey Thompson the door to throw down the field. And like this game, if it is as high scoring as it's supposed to be, a quarterback throwing for under 175 yards, like this isn't Georgia Tech offense. They're not trying to run the ball every single play. They're going to have to open the door down the field. And I mean, last week, Casey Thompson didn't really throw the ball too much, but they were playing Rice and they had 2 75-yard touchdown runs before halftime and he got pulled. I Tell me what you think about this Texas offense and Casey Thompson.
I actually had this written down not as one of my top 4, but one I wanted to highlight. And it comes down to uncertainty. He smashes this projection just on my end. I'm looking on the back end, and these are obviously median projections. He's at 232 yards. So for him to go 60 yards under this would be a significant, he would be performing just so below average if he were to hit that. And we're talking about like a Steve Sarkisian offense. Texas Tech is going to play fast. They're going to play up tempo. Rice is really slow. And even though Texas killed them, Rice kind of saps play volume from teams. So Texas not running as many plays as they should recently. The play volume should be a little bit higher. The pass rate should be higher. And as long as Casey Thompson is even average, he should smash that prop.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I feel like they're worried about him getting benched, but I just don't think they're going to go back to Hudson Card after benching Hudson Card for Casey Thompson. And the only real concern that I have is those weapons in the receiver room for Texas. But I mean, Bijan Robinson can get 60 yards receiving by himself on a few plays. And I think this 175 over under is just way too low. I think that's going to jump up to the 200s by game day.
Yeah, it absolutely should.
Yeah. But going into your next pick is one of the top running backs in college football with Breese Hall. I see that you love the over of 89.5 rushing yards.
That is one I think that is set way too low. Brees Hall is seeing like a Trey Potts workload, and they've gotten in some bad game scripts, particularly that week 2 game against Iowa. Iowa's one of the best defensive lines in the country, and Iowa State's offensive line is a little suspect at times, but that's not why we like this bet. You have Iowa State as a touchdown favorite over a Baylor team that is 3-0, but they haven't played anybody, and the same Baylor team went 2-7 last year. So bookmakers are already adjusting for that, and you should get Brees Hall playing with positive game script. From there, he's already carried the ball 60 times, and we look to his games, 23 carries, 16 carries. That was negative game script against Iowa, and then 21 carries again. This is projected to be a close game, and we saw Brees Hall eclipse 20 carries plenty of times last year. As long as he has modest efficiency, which he hasn't had partially due to opponent, he should easily go over 89.5 rushing yards. I've been projected above 100.
Yeah, I mean, he's just too talented. Like, he's one of those running backs that he's still one of the best running backs in football. I feel like anytime his line is under 95 yards, it feels like a good bet for the most part. Like,
he was an All-American last year.
Like, this isn't, if you look at the other running backs on the slate, like Bijan's up in the 112s, Potts is up in the 112s. Like, this guy gets the ball 30 times a game, and rightfully so. And I couldn't agree more. That's one of the bets that I actually wrote up in the article, which last week I went 4-1. Hopefully this week I can go 5-0.
That was a fantastic call by you last week on so many different players, Kenneth Walker in particular. So I will be making sure to take a look at that article myself.
Yeah, man, your projections helped to say the least. And it was just me knowing Miami football and not being able to tackle anybody whatsoever. Like, they were struggling against Appalachian State. But moving forward to the next play for me, it is Mateo Durant, the Duke running back, over 99.5 rushing yards. He's facing Kansas, who's gone back-to-back weeks, giving up over 100 yards rushing. Mateo Durant is the vocal point of this Duke team. He has been one of the best running backs in football for the country, and he's just an absolute stud. I think 99 is a low prop against Kansas, where he should see 25 to 30 carries. They are 16-point favorites, but still he's going to get a huge workload, and Kansas has not shown signs that they can stop the run. What do you think about this one?
I think it's a smash play. Kansas ranks 118th in rushing yards allowed per attempt. So even adjusting for the negative games, or the positive game script their opponents have been in, Kansas is still just getting dashed on the ground. Durant, he's a feature back. He's like up there with Brees Hall in terms of workload. So as long as he's not super inefficient, which you and I both are not expecting that, he's been one of the most efficient backs in the country, he should smash this prop.
Yeah, and I mean, Duke's not going to go and kill teams through the air because they just don't have the talent on that side of the ball. They're going to feature him in this game. I know, like, you're thinking, oh, Duke running back, this game could be a close game, but it's Kansas. They're not exactly a good team. But moving on to one of the, best promos that we have out there, if you want, advice and just great research, you should definitely join the Awesemo weekly package for $29.95 to get access to every single sport. But if you want to focus just on college football, you can get it for $14.95 weekly. And Matt's projections for me last year, I had $90 in a DFS lineup turned into 55 grand because of him. This is something that I don't take lightly. Matt's been one of the best minds for college football, and his projections are super helpful. He breaks it down to targets, yards, and multiple levels, and you can see the value in certain plays where he's like, well, this guy's way too underpriced, and you could just see it through his projections. Take advantage of it. It's been fantastic so far for me. But moving along, Matt, you got another running back that I am interested to see why you have the under for his rushing yards over with Arkansas in Traelin Smith.
Yeah, so we'll talk Traelin Smith. He's a guy that really broke out last year for this team. But even looking at Traelin Smith, just from a physical standpoint, he's not a big back. He's 5'9", 190 pounds. He doesn't profile as a 3-down back. And Arkansas had to use him in that capacity last year out of just raw necessity. And looking at his prop, it's at 71.5 yards. They're an underdog to Texas A&M, who's been a very stout defense to start the year. And again, Texas A&M hasn't had a huge, like a significant level of competition to start the year. This is going to be their hardest game, but they are still favored here. And this Texas A&M defense is still allowing under 162 rushing yards per game. Now, with that said, the real reason I'm a little bit concerned with Traelin Smith and why I think the under's the play here is he's been ceding more and more work to different backs. Raheem Sanders carried the ball 10 times in their last game, 8 games the game prior. Dominique Johnson has factored in. Even a guy named AJ Green has factored in. And game script has played a little bit of a role. Arkansas has blown out some opponents, but Texas was mixed in there. In that game, Traelin Smith only 12 carries. So we're just seeing some of the opportunity decline, which I think makes sense for a back that only weighs 190 pounds. I think under 71.5 rushing yards makes a lot of sense here with Arkansas as a 5.5 point underdog in a tough matchup.
Yeah, I mean, the SEC games make it a little different. Like, I know his averages are pretty around that 72 number, but when you're going up against the Texas A&M defense that is just stout, I completely agree. And on the other side, KJ Jefferson can run too. So, like, he's getting carry siphoned from multiple different directions. It's for the 190-pound back, the only way I feel like he hits this type of rushing yard total is if he just breaks like a crazy 40-yard run where just a mid-blown assignment that you can't really account for. As long as Texas A&M is playing the way that they've played all year, I don't see him hitting this over/under as well. And another pick of yours, this guy, I'm gonna call you out for being a homer with your next pick, but I actually completely agree with this too. I love this man. I think he's an NFL talent and he's elite at this position. So I'll let you take it over here.
Yeah, it's Notre Dame's Michael Mayer, who's sitting with a 49.5 receiving yard prop. There's a couple reasons you might not like this. The total in the game is really low, 46.5. Notre Dame is a 6.5 point underdog. However, at least early in the season, the way Wisconsin's been beat has been through the air. If you watch the Penn State game, you saw Jahan Dotson just streaking down the field, and they've been very stout against the run. They're only allowing 33 yards per game. With Michael Mayer, he's not just the team's tight end, but he's the wide receiver one. They'll use him all over the formation in the slot, leads the team in targets at 25% target share. And they're supposed to be playing from a deficit, which means they should be throwing the ball. The team that's already very pass heavy, throwing the ball 52% of the time, up tempo, running 75 plays per game. And Mayer also leads the team in receiving yards. So it's not just little underneath targets either. He is a guy that can stretch down the field. And that's going to be an issue for Wisconsin's linebackers. You have Michael Mayer just too athletic for them to cover. And then when you put safeties and DBs on him, Michael Mayer is just too big. So as the target leader for this team in negative game script against a Wisconsin defense, weaker against the pass, I'll take the over on Michael Mayer.
Yeah, Michael Mayer is definitely a line that I think will get up to the high 50s, closer to Saturday after so many people bet it. We see these lines change very often. So if you don't take advantage of it now, I think you're making a mistake. Like I had earlier in the week, Will Shipley's over under a rushing yards at 59.5, and it's all the way up to 69. And that's still a play that me and you both like, but we'll possibly get to towards the end of the show. Moving along to one of my favorite picks this week is Treylin Burks over 4 receptions. This year, he's been averaging 7 targets a game in a game that and this is going to be a game that they are supposed to be losing. And in terms of talent, Treylin Burks was one of my favorite receivers for just the NFL going into this season. And KJ Jefferson may not be the most efficient passer, but I think the volume will just be there because, as you said, you're taking the under on the rushing. I think they're going to have to throw the ball in this game, and I think Treylin Burks is going to be the heavy target. Last year against this same Texas A&M team, he had 7 receptions for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. The only reason I'm not taking the over in receiving is because I just think the receptions is the better bet because of pure volume. How do you view Treylin Burks in this one?
I don't know how this one slipped by me. I just went and cross-referenced with his projection. He's at 6.5 receptions for me. So this is one I'm immediately going to bet. I don't have a ton to add. I think everything you said holds true. He's one of the most talented receivers in the country. There's a fun Twitter account that I follow. I can't remember it, so excuse me here, but they basically do like the analytics where they put the chip in player shoulder pads. They test how fast they are. Treylin Burks was the fastest receiver in last week's game. He just caught a bomb and was able to streak down the field. But Treylin Burks is like 220 pounds. For him to be running like 23 miles an hour, this dude is supremely talented, and I don't think Texas A&M's DBs are going to be able to stick with him. We also know KJ Jefferson's going to feed him the ball, so I like that prop quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, so far this year, like he's running the most routes, and the rest of the receiving core is a rotation. Like they don't have anybody else who's that alpha. And I mean, Treylin Burks last year, I remember early in the year he got hurt, and he was the pick that helped me get to where I where I wanted to be with the money. Because you were like, this dude, he got hurt, didn't play a week because, but he dressed up. So then DraftKings took his price from like 6,700 all the way down to 4,000, and you're like, this guy's getting every target for this team. He just didn't play last week because he wasn't fully healthy. This week they're saying he's fully healthy, and that was a game against Texas A&M where he just absolutely smashed. This is the same exact or matchup where I think it's just so easy to take advantage of because of the pure volume he's going to get in this one.
Yeah, he has a 35% target share.
Yeah, it's absolutely absurd. And we've picked a lot of overs so far, which everybody likes to root for a good over. So for me, the one of the my favorite unders to pick is Jahan Dotson, the Penn State wide receiver, under 6 receptions. They're playing Villanova as 34-point favorites. He's definitely the best player on the field, but I just don't think there's any reason he should be getting more volume than he has in past weeks. And I expect Penn State to try to establish the run after failing it to do so against Auburn. This is a game where this guy is going to be taken out at halftime. I don't see this being an over at all. I can only see it matching at best. If this was 4.5, I would be sketchy on where to bet it. But at 6 receptions, I just think it's an easy play to put in to fill out and get that 5 to picks to get the 10x where you need. What do you think?
I'm with you 100%. I don't see him playing much past halftime if everything goes according to plan, and I don't see any reason why it shouldn't. It just comes down to playing time. He's not going to see a full workload, assuming Penn State takes care of business as they have in every game this year. So I'm fully with you there.
Yeah, and it's like you can look right next to him. You have Khalil Shakir, who's in a game script where it's supposed to be a closer game, and he's the same type of elite receiver. Like this guy's 6 receptions when he's only supposed to take a half, while the other one's 6.5. But as I hinted earlier, we were going to get some Will Shipley talk, who is one of my favorite running backs, who I drafted in each of my college football redraft leagues. His over is at 69.5 after being at 59.5. How do you like him this week?
This Clemson team has been just horribly inefficient the entire year. DJ Uiagalelei has been really inefficient. Even Shipley last week was inefficient himself, but he punched in 2 touchdowns, so he got there. You have this Clemson team only favored by 10 points against NC State. What it comes down to with Shipley is volume. They had Lynn J. Dixon transfer out of the program, or he at least left the program, because they fed Will Shipley 21 carries, and change of pace back Kobe Pace only received 7. So this looks like Will Shipley's job moving forward, which makes a lot of sense. He's their 5-star recruit, their heir apparent to Travis Etienne. I don't think there's going to be a ton of efficiency there, but I do think there's volume, especially with the Clemson passing attack struggling so much. So in a way, Uiagalelei's struggles as a passer might let Clemson lean more on the run, as maybe they did back with like a Kelly Bryant team, which should help Shipley with his volume. And his projection's really low. Like if he sees 21 carries again, he's going to smash that on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like he looked clearly the most talented running back from this Clemson backfield. And with DJ struggling as heavily as he is, I mean, they got to lean somewhere. And this NC State team hasn't played a team that really wants to run the ball at all this year, or can do so efficiently. Where you had their game against Mississippi State, who just doesn't run ever, and USF is the other game that I'm off the top of my head remembering. So this is going to be their first test of an actual, talented run offense. And for Clemson, this is the ACC. This is where they're supposed to go and dominate. They didn't do so last week against Georgia Tech, but this is where they need to get it going for them to have a chance in the college football playoffs. Now that they have their running back, I expect him to get into the 20 to 25 touch range. And I mean, Justin Ross and Nagata have to win out the outside for them to be able to efficiently be the dominant football team we've seen in the past few years.
And they're not. The PFF generated a stat. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it was like a separation statistic. And Clemson was one of the worst teams in the country. So that's a direct reflection of Ross, Nada, and Ladson. not separating, not giving Galilei easy throws. And part of that's coaching too. You got to open some of that up yourself. But I think all that does help Shipley.
Yeah. And one of the favorite DFS games of the slate, you got Max Duggan versus TCU versus SMU, which is a very interesting matchup. You have Max Duggan over the 237.5 passing yard line. That was something that I looked at, but I didn't hit. What makes you think that Max Duggan's going to get to that over?
This one's a little bit down the board for me. So I prefer basically every prop we had till this point more than the Duggan prop, but there's still some pretty good value here. Duggan and TCU play super fast. They're running 84 plays per game already this year. They're pretty up tempo in the past as well. SMU is the exact same style of offense. They're going to play up tempo. SMU is going to be a lot pass heavier. So I'm just expecting a lot of raw play volume overall in the game. From there, 65-point total. So bookmakers are already projecting a lot of scoring. Duggan's prop is really low, and that's because TCU's played some really, really easy teams so far this year. They beat Duquesne. They played Cal, and that game was actually a little closer than expected. 34-32 was the final score, which I also think lends itself to shootout potential in the game. Duggan's been a really efficient passer. He just hasn't been asked to do it as much this year with teams like Duquesne on the schedule. So he's got about 20 yards worth of value on this projection. Really good receivers he's throwing to in Quentin Johnson. Savon Williams is someone really excited about too. But Duggan, just with his efficiency, he's going to project a little bit better than his listed prop.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And SMU isn't exactly the defense that really will shut you down on that side of the ball. And as a person with DFS, I've been very interested in that TCU SMU game for these quarterbacks and stacking them against each other. And this is the perfect matchup for Duggan to show that he can throw the ball downfield. And just wanted to give a shout out to Carlos Manzo, who, we helped win $350 last week. And if Michael Mayer would have hit that over under, would have won 1,000. I was trying to figure out which one we got wrong on the show. I knew Jakari Robinson was one, but I guess Michael Mayer was the other.
Yeah, sorry, Carlos. That was on me, buddy. I got that one wrong for you. My bad.
I mean, hey, Michael Mayer has been so freaking good this year. He's one of the best in the entire country, in my opinion. I just wish that Notre Dame had more consistency with their offense and was a little bit better on that side of the ball, but it's just part of their MO, I guess.
You and me both, man. I'm a Notre Dame fan, and I'm excited for the game this weekend. I think Mayer's prop is still a good value, but for the game overall, I'm a little weary.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame's one of those teams for me that I was just hoping does not get in the college football playoff game again, but it seems like there could be. I mean, that Cincinnati game is the game that I'm really interested in because you guys stole their defensive coordinator to play them and probably their biggest game in school history. Because if Cincinnati can get by you guys, no Dylan Gabriel for UCF, they could be the team that actually gets into the college football playoffs before they move over to the Big 12.
That'll be an interesting conversation for down the road. I'm excited to see what happens.
Of course. But anyways, if you guys haven't already, download PrizePicks, use code Awesemo. We will match up to $100 on your first deposit. It's a great deal, and you can take advantage of these bets. Just follow Carlos. Just don't pick Michael Mayer because Matt will hurt you with that because of his homerism. But hopefully we can 10x someone on the chat, someone that's tuning in live, and be sure to like and subscribe. There's other YouTube channels that you guys should also check out. The odds and fantasy channels have been killing it. Matt and Ben have been dominating for college football and giving you a ton of ways to make money. It's the easiest thing you can do. And tonight at 6 p.m., they have the college football live before lock, which is a perfect thing to tune into. You'll see me in the chat. I'll usually make fun of them, but I appreciate you guys coming out, listening in, and asking questions in the chat. Hopefully Michael Mayer hits us over, and that's all we got for you guys today. Have a good one, boys.